Ladies and gentlemen, it's officially over for NFL running backs everywhere. I can't believe what's happening right now. We are set to have the deepest running back free agent class in NFL history. ESPN's Adam Schefter came out with this story late in the afternoon saying that none of the top running backs will be franchise tagged before free agency starts. That means Derrick Henry is going to be available. That means Tony Pollard's going to be available. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and also Austin Ekeler is expected to be available. All these guys were superstars at one point with their respective teams, but the NFL running back market has been going downhill. Teams have learned that they can have a cheap running back and still have the same production as some of the greatest stars in the NFL. Derrick Henry is one of the more intriguing prospects among all the top running backs entering free agency. Mike Vrabel of the Tennessee Titans was recently fired and let go, so it does make sense that the Tennessee Titans would look to move away from one of their centerpieces as they restart with new head coach Brian Callahan. The big thing that's intriguing about Derrick Henry is the fact that one of the top teams in the AFC were trying to get this guy last year. Ari Mirov of 33rd Team and PFF let us know recently that the Tennessee Titans discussed trading Derrick Henry to Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens before the trade deadline in October just this past season. Obviously, the Baltimore Ravens went deep all the way to the AFC Championship game before falling to the Kansas City Chiefs and the Swifties in that key matchup. Derrick Henry is a big bruiser running back coming out of Alabama who's definitely proven himself over the past few years. One of his best assets is that he utilizes his strength, not relying on speed so much, so the fact that he's getting older and maybe slower really won't diminish the best part of his game. And if you're going to pair this guy with Lamar Jackson, especially if it's going to be for cheap, considering the fact the Ravens are not going to have to trade for this guy and the running back market is depressed, it looks like the Baltimore Ravens could have a scary running game this upcoming year. Running backs were upset going into last year. They were pissed about the fact that they could not get new contracts. A lot of them were tagged, and one of the most notable upset running backs was Austin Ekeler. He even went as far as to say that he felt disrespected by his own organization, the team that he loves, when they refused to have contract talks with him. Instead of negotiating for a new contract, they just ghosted this guy and let his contract expire, and that is why he is going to be a free agent this upcoming season. Austin Ekeler was one of the more dynamic running backs for the LA Chargers for quite some time, contributing in the passing game in addition to the running game. But now that the Chargers have a brand new head coach with a fat contract like Jim Harbaugh, they're no longer personally committed to the guy. No GM or head coach is in the building that originally invested in Austin Ekeler. Perhaps he can find himself on a team like the Houston Texans, a team that would need a running back who's a change of pace receiving back this upcoming season. But due to having some low production last year, it's highly unlikely that he will get a fat contract. Saquon Barkley is a key running back who is not going to be franchise tagged by the New York Giants. The Giants claim they're going to try to negotiate a new contract with the guy, but remember, things got intense last year. Saquon Barkley was on the verge of holding out until the Giants gave him a little bonus to return on the franchise tag. He was one of the key running backs vocal and upset about the fact that he was franchise tagged last year, and now this year, he's not even going to be franchise tagged at all. Barkley did not have amazing production last year. He battled a little ankle injury in the middle of the season, but was still able to get over 900 yards rushing, and you gotta give this guy a break. He was having to work with quarterback Tommy DeVito, a man who was a flash last year. The Giants were a complete disaster after losing Daniel Jones. Brian Dable flipping out and yelling at people and also yelling at defensive coordinator Wink Martindale probably was not going to lead to success even if Daniel Jones was in the building anyways. So I believe Saquon Barkley could find himself on a decent contract this upcoming season. It's not going to be close to what the franchise tag was giving this guy, but I believe there will be a team that could convince themselves that Saquon Barkley could be a difference maker, maybe a $5 million contract with some incentives on top of that. I could see that happening. And Robert Griffin III, ESPN commentator, former Washington quarterback, also thinks that Saquon Barkley could be on the move to a division rival, the Dallas Cowboys. He has him photoshopped in a Cowboys jersey right here, saying that Saquon's a 3-down back who brings flash and substance. The quad god is still one of the most dynamic players in the NFL with the ball in his hands in the open field. And I actually do think this is sort of a realistic move considering the fact the Dallas Cowboys have their own running back problem just like some of these other teams we have already mentioned. After being franchise tagged last season, Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys is not expected to be franchise tagged again, and it looks like he will also be hitting the open market in free agency. And the reason why people like Robert Griffin III bring up somebody like Saquon Barkley for the Dallas Cowboys is because I believe if you're looking for a pass catching back, somebody who can make some moves in open field, Saquon Barkley would be a great cheaper veteran replacement for somebody like Tony Pollard. It seems like the Cowboys are always doing this where they have a running back rising, keep him for a few years and then dump them. This just happened to Ezekiel Elliot, and then he dealt with some injuries with the Dallas Cowboys, then hit free agency, became a New England Patriot, and now we don't really hear about Ezekiel Elliot anymore. I'm not saying the same thing is happening to Tony Pollard, but oftentimes the Dallas Cowboys running back is just a flash in the pan, and it seems like Pollard will be another flash in the pan unless he can find somewhere else to ball out in free agency in 2024. One likely destination for somebody like Tony Pollard would be the Los Angeles Chargers linking up with Jim Harbaugh. If the Chargers move on from Austin Ekeler, which it seems like they're likely going to do, then Tony Pollard would fit in perfectly for that same role that Austin Ekeler had, an elusive running back that can make plays while receiving the football along with rushing on the outside. The big story for me personally, since I am a Raiders fan, is Josh Jacobs not being franchise tagged by the Las Vegas Raiders. I was surprised about this. It seems like he has a good connection with head coach Antonio Pierce, and Josh Jacobs was a captain on the Raiders last year, led the NFL in rushing in 2022, despite the fact that he had to work with genius Josh McDaniels. Speaking of McDaniels, we know going into the 2023 season, things were awkward between the Raiders and Josh Jacobs. He would make cryptic posts on social media, upset about the fact that he took a gamble on himself in 2022, led the NFL in rushing, and the Raiders would still not extend him to a long-term contract. And he was eventually franchise tagged, grabbed some incentives on top of that. He held out a little bit, but then was given some incentives and then returned to training camp and played for the Raiders in 2023. Unfortunately, even when Josh McDaniels was fired and Antonio Pierce became the new head coach, Josh Jacobs was still not as productive as he was in 2022. Maybe it's the offensive line, maybe it's the scheme, and that's the problem with the running back position, is it seems like these backs could only go as far as their offensive line and offensive coordinator. Jacobs would also deal with a quad injury during the final 3 games of the regular season, and he would have his career low in rushing yards in 2023. Head coach Antonio Pierce does seem to like this guy, and there are reports that the Raiders are still going to try to retain Jacobs even if it's outside of the franchise tag. But Pierce would not let Josh Jacobs date his daughter.
Josh Jacobs. No, Josh. I love you, Josh.
Josh Jacobs also had some lady problems during the season in 2023. His girlfriend at the time, an OF model named Wo Kinsey, allegedly caught him messing around with somebody else, and things got so hairy that she even made a TikTok talking about it.
I walked into the bedroom and saw a random girl, never seen her before, laying on the bed that, we share because he asked me to move in. And she's laying on her stomach, kicking her feet in the air, all happy, thinking it's him, but surprise, it's me.
But luckily for Josh Jacobs and Wo Kinsey, it looks like they've gotten back together. In addition to all these great running backs, you got tons of people hitting the open market as well. There's going to be so much competition. DeAndre Swift, the Philadelphia Eagle, former Lion, AJ Dillon, former Green Bay Packer, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, J.K. Dobbins, former Baltimore Raven, who had some injuries last year, and also Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the Chiefs running back who was a first-round pick at some point. So not only do you have superstars hitting free agency at the running back position, but you also have a lot of guys who could be serviceable enough if you're a pass first team and have a good offensive line. It's going to be so tough for these running backs to get paid on the open market. I think we are going to see record-breaking low contracts for great running backs this year. If you're still watching at this point, I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more NFL content from me, Wi-Fi Willie. Peace out, and I hope you have a good one.